Alright, everyone say hello to Fuji. She has to stay with me or else she'll bark during my video. Today, we're talking about SINGA's Polycarbonate Kohaku, which is an in-stock board with crazy aesthetics and a pretty good sound. To understand why this board is important to me, we gotta think about how I got from the thick 6.5 V1 to another board to finally ended up on this one. Throughout the video, I'm going to be referring to this as the Polyhaku, so Polycarbonate Kohaku. Just a little pen name. Or if I want to be funny, I can call it the FAQ, which Elaine's not going to like, so I'm going to call it the Polyhaku. So CNC polycarbonate as a material for a keyboard was pretty rare, especially in 2019. It cost a lot more due to how likely it was to fail. So although plastic as a material is gonna be like, plastic should be cheaper than metal, right? Unfortunately, because of all the failure, the final cost of the board is gonna be very similar from the CNC polycarbonate to the aluminum. These days, in terms of cost efficiency, there is injection mold polycarbonate boards as well as injection mold ABS. And those, they just don't have the same heft. And the way they look, like you can see right here, you don't see any mounting points, right? It's just kind of manufactured the same way as, you know, an aluminum board, just see-through. Injection mold boards are less expensive and easy to manufacture, but it has a lot of mounting points and it looks kind of gross. CNC polycarbonate is just going to be cleaner. And personally, I enjoy the thick 6.5 V1 because my favorite layout, 65%. It has these arrow keys as well as a navigation to make it easier to go through PDFs as well as navigate through things like for work, you know? The RGB was really cool because at the time I was really into colorful lights, playing games in the dark, and that aesthetic for the tech YouTuber was really attractive to me. Unfortunately, the Think 6.5 V1 had a really small weight, so it felt really light, and although the sound was pretty good, the mounting was very stiff. So it was fair that I was kind of like mocked, but hey, preference. Like if someone likes something, let them like it, all right? In terms of aluminum boards, like the aluminum Kohaku, it's gonna feel much heavier, much heftier, especially since it has a brass weight on top of the metal of the aluminum. It feels very different from the plastic gamer keyboards you've felt over the years, so it feels like it's a nice upgrade. I didn't end up being able to return to the RGB and polycarbonate life until the Rukia R1. Once I was dealing the Rukia that I bought aftermarket, I realized that polycarbonate boards definitely leaned a little bit deeper in tone compared to the aluminum counterparts. So unless there's one manufacturer that has the same design aluminum and polycarbonate, it can be really hard to tell. But right here I do have the aluminum Kohaku as well as the polycarbonate Kohaku. So we can do a comparison. I really like the Rukia because the Adelis PCB had perky RGB as well as underglow, so it was a freaking light show. I ended up selling it because the designer scammed everyone in the R2 run, so I didn't like to own something from a scammer. So lo and behold, enter the Polyhaku. It's a really nice keyboard. It is SINGA's CNC polycarbonate version of the famous Kohaku, which I will say, the Kohaku, the aluminum variant, has been flooding the market because Elaine is shipping more and more units, so it's gonna be easier and easier for people to get. Unfortunately, you still have to pay aftermarket if you missed the raffle, but the aftermarket price isn't crazy. I think overall the trend is that the market is just not so hot anymore. People are selling off a lot of things, so things aren't gonna be as expensive. So what's special about the polycarbonate Kohaku? So it has a brass weight instead of the copper from the Kohaku R1, and the main thing is it's in stock, straight up. Elaine is goated for doing an in-stock drop of Kohakus. Otherwise, you're gonna be waiting for a group buy and it's gonna take forever, blah, blah, blah. Like group buys are kind of a drag. The polycarbonate Kohaku has one thing that was a weak point for the Think. It has threaded inserts. So what does that mean? Threaded inserts means that it's a little brass piece, so when you screw it in, you're screwing into metal rather than plastic. The inserts prevent you from stripping the threads in your plastic board. This is a very low cost add to any polycarbonate board, but for some reason, it's often omitted. The PCB here was also remade to showcase the RGB, so the RGB is actually not going to be showing visible from the back. It will, however, light up the fish. So let me try to do this one-handed. Fuji sleeping in my lap. See how the RGB is going to be bouncing off of the brass weight, and then it just kind of glows around it, and most importantly, it lights up the scales of the fish. Great aesthetic. I really like how that's done, and this weight is actually my favorite style where it's cut out. So I can see the other material contrasting with the weight itself. It's not as bright as the perky and underglow RGB of the Rukia days, but that PCB was kind of crazy and ended up dying on me anyway. Without visible LEDs, you won't see if the position of the LEDs aren't symmetrical. This is really a drawback in a lot of boards because when it's a bright light, you can definitely see if one side has more LEDs than the other or it's not centered. It's really distracting. The mounting itself is going to be similar to the Kohaku R1, gasket mount with only 4 screws at the corners to remove it. Really easy to assemble, really easy to disassemble to swap builds. The main point of contention was from the first drop of the in-stock, people did not like that the black gaskets showed up on the polycarbonate board. It's a typical thing, it's a common thing. So there was a request to use white gaskets for the next drop of the in-stock Kohaku. I believe it was a mistake, like honestly, look at it. The white pops more than the black would. You know what? The white gaskets didn't make it better. From my angle sitting looking at it, look at how clearly it's sticking out. It's time for clear gaskets, ladies and gentlemen. Go clear. So turn out the lights. It kind of reacts as black. With the light on though, considering the gaskets aren't like pure white, it's worse. So Elaine is offering both options during the drop, so at least she's doing that. I think I prefer the black gasket, so I was not one that requested the white. Okay, it's not my fault. So we have here an RGB polycarbonate board that is a better version in every single way of my old Endgame Think 6.5 V1. In terms of upgrades, we got proper gasket mounting, thread inserts, a new RGB design, great diffusion of the RGB, and is made by a maker I'm happy to support. They didn't scam nobody. Case design is also seamless, so there's no way for you to see any kind of visible gap from the side or from the front. So I gotta mention that this keyboard here was given to me for review, so it is a production run review unit. Call this an indefinite loan. I would still personally pay the full retail of 570 shipped or so for it, and that's because I have no shame in admitting that RGB turns me on. I mean, I like it when the RGB lights turn on. So how is the polycarbonate Kohaku different from the aluminum Kohaku? Sound wise, you're gonna want to swing for the aluminum Kohaku. It's just not really a competition. The aluminum Kohaku is going to yield the poppiest sound. Aluminum cases with a big weight, they just sound better. They pop, they sing. The spacebar on the aluminum board is just way better. The polycarbonate board in comparison is going to have a duller sound. Before I got the review unit, I was kind of scared because although the aluminum Kohaku sounds really nice, a higher pitched gasket sound, I imagined the polycarbonate version was going to have a deeper sound and sound more dull and boring. In the end, yeah, it's kind of true. The polycarbonate board is just going to be quieter. If you don't like that, go for the aluminum one. Is that a bad thing? No. Some people just don't prefer to have a really sharp, loud, poppy, lightly lubed MX Black and aluminum sound. Some people like deeper sounds, and that's okay. Where the Kohaku shines is the aesthetic. You can go understated and turn the RGB off and use colorful keycaps and really let them shine on their own. Or you can go full gamer mode with some more minimal keycaps and turn off the lights in your room and have a party. I personally love that versatility with a frosted polycarbonate case. So what are the weak points of the polycarbonate Kohaku? The sound isn't as crisp and as top tier as the aluminum variant, but it's still pretty good. It's a little bit on the quieter end, so I definitely would suggest a long pole switch there at the bare minimum. The regular ink on aluminum was kind of lame, wouldn't really recommend that. And the other thing is it's definitely lighter compared to the aluminum one. You can't really change physics, right? But the weight is decently big, so it gives us some heft. There's also some note on the board flexing a bit. When I grab the board from the bottom and top like this, I can kind of feel the top case like deflect a little bit. It's not really distracting. It's not something I've been keeping note of from all the polycarbonate boards I've tried, but it's there. And that's just a fact of plastic as material versus aluminum. I will say the Forever 65 didn't feel as thin at the top and bottom, so it was a little bit denser. And with polycarbonate, even though there's no seam, I can see like the top and bottom pieces look really odd just because of how dense the polycarbonate is there. There's like a shadow or something, so it's not as seamless as the aluminum board. So if you want that clean side, go with the aluminum one. And with polycarbonate, you gotta be careful. This already has tons of micro scratches, and you just gotta live with it. You can try your best to protect it, but it's just a fact of polycarbonate. And the biggest knock is that it looks like KBD 67 Mark II from the top. We can't really do anything about that because there's no top right blocker, and honestly you're not gonna be turning your board over all the time, so yeah, it's gonna look pretty boring. And that sucks a little bit, but I also still own a yellow tofu. In the end, I'm honestly personally gonna be biased because I'm an unabashed fan of Singa keyboards. I don't love all of them, but I can appreciate them. Although it may not sound as good as the aluminum version, a light up RGB fish is crazy. Like, I honestly love the aesthetic of this, even if I don't turn it over all the time. And with any other Singa board, you're getting high quality CNC with Singa quality control standards. In the end, this is not a cheap keyboard. $570 shipped is kind of hefty. It's not a beginner keyboard. It's solid in the endgame side of things that has refined finishes to reflect it, and it's allowed me to finally get RGB and polycarbonate back in my life and return to my favorite layout, the 65%. Dedicated delete key, arrow keys, and nav. Those things are just really hard to give up. So will I buy another keyboard? Do I have my end game? Honestly, pretty close, because over time you get over trying to find the top best sound of any keyboard because you kind of just get used to it and just accept it. There's kind of more things to listen for than sound, even though I'm personally a sound guy. RGB just kind of makes me forget everything. The market for keyboards is evolving so rapidly that the hobby looks completely different these days. The few reliable makers like Singa are still standing and pushing out great products, but it's hard to imagine new players stepping in and making a name for themselves. This mid-range to high-end range of keyboards is not for everyone. But for me, this polycarbonate Kohaku is an absolute banger, and I ain't never leaving my house. RGB all day, baby. Thanks to Elaine for sending me this for review. Hopefully you all enjoy the video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. I'm trying my best. I'm still holding a puppy. Alright, bye.